Hey friends, welcome back to Horror Stories Bedtime. Take a deep breath, find a quiet place. Imagine the small hum of an apartment building, the light from a street lamp through thin curtains, the soft patter of rain against a window. Tonight's story is about a simple thing you might do in a normal life, answering a Craigslist ad for a free couch. It sounds harmless. Sometimes harmless things are the ones that teach us the most. Let's begin. When my girlfriend and I broke up, we split the things that made the apartment ours. She took the plants and the old record player. I took the cheap TV and the bookshelf we built together on a rainy Sunday. There was a couch left, the one we'd shared for late-night movies, for quiet dinners on the floor, for the kind of small talk that keeps a home soft. It wasn't much. Brown fabric, a sag in the middle, springs that complained when you sat down, but it was familiar. On the last night before the movers came, I set it out on the curb with a sign, "Free couch, take it." I promised myself I'd feel free too. At 6 a.m., someone had already taken it. I made coffee, fed my cat, and went to work feeling like I had closed a small book and put it back on a shelf. I told myself moving on was practical. I told myself the city had other couches and other nights. A few days later, when I walked past a used furniture store, my phone buzzed. It was a Craigslist alert I had bookmarked months before. New posts in the free section. One listing read, "Free couch, small tricky stains must pick up tonight, will help carry." The photo showed a couch that could have been mine. Brown, a sag, a throw blanket draped over the arm. The address was in a quiet part of the city, row houses with stoops. A hardware store that closed at 7, a church with a bell that rang on Sundays. Curiosity is a quiet engine. I texted the number. A woman answered. Her voice was soft and quick, like someone who'd learned to speak around bobbies. "You coming for the couch?" she asked. "It's free, first come." "I can come in an hour," I said, because I could. It was a weeknight and I owed myself something that was not moving boxes or lawyers' emails. She gave me directions, not the best directions, but friendly. Turn at the pharmacy, go past the mural, ring the bell with the little blue sticker. She told me she'd be home late from work. She said she'd help me get it downstairs. When I arrived, the street smelled like wet asphalt and the last of summer flowers. The house was a narrow brick place with a stoop and a small porch light. A paper sign taped to the door said "Move Out Sale" in a shaky hand. I paused on the stoop. For a second I thought of my old couch on the curb and then told myself to knock. A young woman opened the door. She looked tired and like she'd slept poorly, soft circles under her eyes, hair pulled into a messy knot. She smiled and held up a small plastic cup with a lemonade stain at the rim. "Thanks for coming," she said. "You'd be saving me a lot of trouble." She led me through a narrow hallway into a living room where the couch sat against the wall. It matched the photo, brown, sagging, wrapped with that same faded throw blanket. There were a few boxes stacked near the door, a lamp with a cracked shade, a stack of college textbooks. "This is it," she said. "It's been good to me." She had a voice that made ordinary words feel careful. "Help me get it out," she asked. We moved it slowly, using the thin rug as a slide. She watched me work and talked like people talk to keep quiet from a room full of memory. She told me she'd lived there for years and that she was moving out because of a job in another state. She apologized for the stains. She said, "It needs a little life." When we got it to the stoop, a man from the apartment above stuck his head out the window and waved like this was a small, friendly event. We slid the couch into my car like a focus exercise. It fit barely. She handed me a small folded paper. "Keep this," she said. "If you ever need help, call." The paper only had the word "Nocturne" and a number. Her finger tapped the edge of the paper. As I drove home, the city looked like a live wire. I told myself the rest of the night would be simple. Drop the couch in the new place, have a beer, watch a show, sleep. Things in the city were practical in that way. When I got inside my building and rolled the couch into the living room, my cat hopped up like it was a new island. I propped a couple of pillows and sat down. The couch sighed, the way old things do, a low, soft sound like a breath. I unpacked the folded paper and dialed the number out of curiosity. A man answered with a single, "Nocturne." It sounded more like a question than a name. I hung up. Over the next few days, the couch fit into my life. Friends sat and complained about the sag. I patched a small tear with a needle and thread. I left the paper under the cushion like a secret. Each night I thought about the woman who'd handed it to me. I thought of the good and the practical that people trade on Craigslist. On day 5, a message appeared on the number she'd given me. A single text, "Do you remember her?" No signature. The question made my skin prickle. I typed back, "Who is this?" and hit send. The reply came quick, "No response necessary. Keep the couch. Check under the cushions tonight." The message had no name, but it had a calm. I told myself to laugh. I told myself it was a practical joke. I told myself the city had bored people who sent texts. I did not check under the cushions that night. I told myself I would wait. That night I slept like someone who has decided to close a drawer that held something old. At 2:13 a.m., my cat woke me with a soft push. I was half asleep, and then I smelled something like soap and damp floor. I sat up, and the living room looked different in the blue cast of the streetlight. The couch seemed to breathe. I realized I had been avoiding something small and private. I moved the throw blanket and reached under the cushion. My hand touched a small hard edge. It scraped the fabric and came out slick and warm. A small glass jar, the kind used for spices, but inside it was a folded paper. I unfolded it. The paper had been written in a careful, tiny script. It said only, "He can't be alone." There was a date written in the corner, a month and year from 5 years ago. There was no name. My heart picked up. I put the jar on the coffee table and told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone left a note when they gave the couch away. Maybe it was a relic from a relationship. People left odd things in couches sometimes. I told myself that because it was kinder than the other things I could imagine. Over the next week I kept finding small things. A key with a plastic tag on it with a faded number. A ticket stub from a movie I'd never seen. A child's sticker shaped like a sun with a bite mark. Each thing felt like a breadcrumb into someone else's life. None of them had names. One evening, the neighbor from upstairs knocked on my door. He was an older man who tended the front garden and always wore a hat. He brought a plate of cookies. "You got the couch," he said. "Good. That one has a way of making people stay a little longer." "What do you mean?" I asked. I did the polite thing and offered a cookie. He paused and scratched his chin. "Lots of folks move in and out of this block. Some things get left behind. Some things want someone to keep them warm." He gave me a quiet look that asked if I was listening. That night the phone number for Nocturne pinged again. The text said, "Check the scene. He writes NAMES." The text had a period like a hard piece of wood. I did not sleep. I sat with the couch and turned the cushions inside out. The seam at the back had been neatly stitched, but under the lining I found an old envelope folded thin. I slid it out carefully. Inside was a list of names, dozens of them. Some were common, Tom, Rita, James. Others were odd, MHOLLOWAY, E. Winters. Each name had a small date next to it. The handwriting was small and steady, and the ink had bled in a few places. What stopped me was not the list itself, but the way the dates lined up. Many were dates when people went missing around the city, small stories in the paper. A man who left home and never came back, a college kid lost to the river, a tenant who disappeared from a rooming house. I remembered the paper clippings. They had never been solved. It would be easy to say the list was a coincidence. Cities hold a lot of paper and a lot of loss. But there was one more thing. At the very bottom of the envelope, written almost like a signature, was a single line. "He writes NAMES in the living room." The line made my mouth dry. A week later, I saw the woman who'd given me the couch on the street. She was carrying a box, and she looked at me like someone who had been waiting for a moment. I walked over. "You're the one who took it?" she asked. Yeah, sorry if it caused trouble. Her eyes flicked to the couch in my window. Did you find the list? She asked. I didn't respond right away. There's a small animal part of you that needs to know what tone a person is in. Her face was neutral. She said, "Some things get heavy if you keep them. Some things ask for company. You can keep it, or you can leave it." She looked like she'd run out of words. "What should I do?" I asked, feeling like a child. She put a hand on my arm and said, "Quiet. Make sure it's not lonely." The next night, my apartment felt thicker. I moved the list into a drawer and tried to sleep, but my thoughts knotted around names like fish on a line. I woke at 3 a.m. and smelled the faint scent of a pipe tobacco I'd always associated with the man upstairs. That scent in an apartment with no tobacco feels like a voice. I tried to ignore it. Then my cat hissed and stared at the couch. He arched his back and made a low sound I'd never heard from him. He jumped down and padded to the window, where he sat and watched the street as if something was moving there invisible to me. The texts kept coming from Nocturne. "Write one name. Leave a light on. Don't turn around." They read like tiny, impossible instructions. At first I ignored them. Then curiosity beat fear. One night, without thinking, I pulled out a pen and wrote a name on a small bit of paper. I didn't know why I chose the name. Maybe it was the first one my mind found. I left the slip under the cushion and kissed it gently, like tucking in someone asleep. It felt foolish. It felt also like sharing a secret with a stranger. The next morning, I found a new slip under the cushion. The handwriting was different. It read, "Thank you." Under it, someone had added a date, today, and then a note in the corner. "He likes to hear it." I panicked and hid the slips in a different drawer. I told myself this was madness. I told myself I had to call someone. I thought about telling the police about the list and the texts and the man upstairs with the pipe smell. I imagined them being polite and saying, "We'll look into it," and then me at home feeling smaller. Instead, I called the woman who gave me the couch. She answered right away. Her voice was as soft as before. "You found it?" she asked. "I did," I said. "What is this?" She stayed quiet. For a long moment I could hear a fan or maybe rain. Then she said, "Some people think the couch remembers. Some people think it keeps." "Keeps what?" She sighed. "Names, time, the things people leave in a place." She sounded tired. "It isn't alive the way you mean, but it wants company. You can set it out for someone else, or you can keep it. Either way, don't pretend it's nothing." "I don't understand," I said. "Most people don't," she laughed short. "But listen, if you ever feel it wanting more, put the list in an envelope and leave it at the church on Sunday. The bells will make it less loud." The simplicity of the instruction made me want to laugh. Stopping things with a bell felt like a child's magic. And yet I put the envelope in my pocket that morning, thinking about church bells and about the way old towns tidy up. I promised to try. That weekend, I took the envelope and walked to the little brick church 2 blocks down. It smelled like lemon cleaner and old hymnals. The bells were silent. Only a gardener came by with a rake. I tucked the list into the donation box and felt like I had given something unnecessary to a place that had seen more unnecessary things. When I came back, the storm came in fast. Rain rattled the roof, and the city seemed to hold its breath. At 2:13 a.m., the text said, "He writes tonight." I pressed my hands into my knees and tried to stay awake. I told myself the list was safe under the church bell, like a coin at the bottom of a wishing well. And then my phone rang. It was the number I'd never saved, Nocturne. The woman I'd met was on the line. "Did you leave it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I meant it." "Good," she said. "Remember, names are heavy. He likes to collect them. If you give him one and you don't want it back, say it aloud first." She sounded like someone quoting rules. "Say the full name. Say where they belong. It helps him remember where to place them." "Who is he?" I asked. My voice was small as a match. She was quiet long enough for me to hear a window click. Then she said, "He used to be a man who sat on couches and watched television. Now he sits at the edge of rooms and waits for people to name him the way you name rooms. She laughed like a lid closing. It's terrible and it's only a thing. Keep your lights on tonight. That night the street was very quiet. The apartment building hummed with old refrigerators and the soft breath of people sleeping. At 2:13, a soft noise like paper moving woke me. I looked at the couch and there, on top of the middle cushion, sat the small jar. It was empty. The jar had a lid now and under it was a slip. On the paper, in careful small script, someone had written one name and a sentence. He likes to listen. Do not turn away. My hands shook. I picked up the jar. It was chill, but not from the air. I felt like a man holding a living thing in his hands. Outside, the rain slacked. Inside, I realized I'd reached the edge of something I could not step back from without leaving a mark. The couch had given me a story, and that story wanted to be finished. I haven't told you everything I found in the couch. There are more slips and more names. There are dates that match news clippings, small items wrapped in tissue, keys that opened rooms I never saw. But stories need time. Tonight I can only tell you the start. If you ever answer an ad that says free, remember that free is not always empty. Things that come to you free may come with a small paper in their pocket. If you find one, treat it like a message. Read it. Say the name out loud. Tell someone you trust. Because some things that used to be ordinary, like couches, can remember too much when we sit on them and leave our names. And sometimes a name is what they ask for first. Good night. Hey friends, welcome back to Horror Stories Bedtime. Take a slow breath. Find a warm place to sit. Imagine a wide parking lot, a lone studio sign, and a camera that always points just a little too long. Tonight's story is about a job listing on Craigslist that seemed normal and how the pictures kept telling me the same secret. Let's begin. After the couch, I thought I might leave Craigslist alone for a while. I had found odd things before: cheap speakers, a set of mismatched chairs, but I'd never worked for someone I met there. I had also learned that free can come with strings. Still, my life needed money. Rent is a steady voice that does not let you be romantic for long. The ad showed up on a slow Sunday morning. It was simple and short. Photographer's assistant, part-time, pay cash. Local temporary work. Must be reliable, call. The photo attached was 4 small pictures stitched together. A dark hallway, a hand holding a flash bulb, a blurred portrait with eyes that looked like they knew more than the face, and a back alley at night. The text said call between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. I almost scrolled past it, but part of me liked the idea of light and dark being my work for a time. I had always loved pictures. I used to take pictures of clouds on my phone and call them little biographies. The world looks honest in a frame, or it looks like a lie that tells us truth. I called. A man answered. He had a thick voice, calm like a clock. He asked me a few simple questions and then said, "Can you come by at 10? Bring comfortable shoes. We work long hours." He gave me an address in the older part of town near the river. He told me to park in the lot behind the building and enter the alleyway. When I arrived, the air smelled like wet paper and a bakery mixing flour. The studio was a narrow place with worn steps leading up to a heavy door. A painted sign read Arrow and Lens Studio in faded letters. I hesitated and checked my phone like a person buying a ticket. Then I climbed the steps and pushed the door. Inside, it felt like being inside a camera. The room had low light and a smell of film and old coffee. There were racks of clothes, boxes of glass slides, and a long table with lenses laid out like small moons. A man in an old cardigan introduced himself as Graham. He had a quiet manner. He smiled small and asked if I liked coffee. We talked quietly while he pulled a camera from a covered table. He told me he'd been a photographer for many years and that sometimes he needed a hand for odd jobs: lighting, hauling gear, editing. The pay was cash. That felt like stepping into a small old-world shop in a modern city. I liked that. I said I could help. He said, "We start with a test." That's normal. He He pointed at a stack of photos and said, "Pick one and tell me what you see." I picked a portrait of a woman standing in a doorway. The photo was old, the edges were soft like a cloud. The woman wore a heavy coat and a hat. The eyes in the photo were blurred in a way that made them bright. I said, "I see someone who waits." Graham nodded and wrote something down in a small black book. "Good," he said. "We'll work on Thursday evening. Bring gloves." He handed me a small contract, short days, cash at the end. I signed. He gave me directions for the job that sounded like a treasure map. "Meet me at the dock at sunset. Bring your phone for messages." He said nothing about coffee stains or lists or couches. That night I went home and told myself it was a small job, a small story. I slept like someone who goes to work the next day. The first day on set felt slower than I expected. The location was a house near the river, not a studio. It was the kind of big old place photographers love: tall windows, a deep porch, rooms that remember people. We were setting up in the parlor where sunlight made rectangles on the floor. A woman in dark clothes moved quietly, placing chairs and dusting frames with a gentle hand. Graham introduced her as Marta. She had photogenic hands and a face with small scars that made her kind. She gave me a strong tea and told me to stand where she said when she called me. She used small, precise words like directions on a map. We worked with natural light. Sometimes she would say, "Longer exposure," and Graham would nod. He taught me how to hold a reflector and how to watch for the moment light opened a face. Most of the job was ordinary and full of repetition. Move a lamp, hold a lens, wipe a surface. It felt good to have something physical to do with my hands. The photos we made that night were strange and beautiful. Marta would stand in a doorway or sit by a window and then fade like a ghost into the room. The camera would catch a double trace, a memory of motion. There was always a softness at the edges like a small fog. Graham would clap when he liked a picture. He would say, "There, hold that breath," and Marta would keep a careful face until the camera stopped. At dinner we ate takeout at the big table. Graham talked about clients like men who kept houses full of memories. He said this work was not about making people look good. It was about showing what stayed after people left. "People forget the small things," he said. "They forget how rooms keep the shape of the living." He smiled and pushed peas around his plate. After dinner, Marta asked me to help with the negatives. Old film felt delicate under my fingers. We developed one roll in a dark tray. When the images came up, I felt the same small chill I felt about the couch list. The photos in the tray were of the house we were in, but something else was there. In the kitchen, a shadow stood at the doorway. In the mirror, a face appeared that was not a reflection. In the basement, a row of small photographs were pinned to a board, each a portrait of someone sleeping. The images made my hands cold. Graham noticed my face and said, "This job is about keeping things visible." He sounded almost gentle. "People ask us to remember." He pointed to a small shelf and said, "Those are the names." The shelf held many envelopes like the list in my couch, small things folded and kept. I recognized the careful hand. When I told him I'd found a list in the couch, he looked at me with something like tired surprise. "You answered Nocturne's number, didn't you?" he asked. I nodded. "That number knows how to find people who will do the work," he said. He tapped a finger on his knee. "Some things want to be photographed. Some things want to be kept." That night as we left, Graham handed me one of the photos he had taken. It was a small print with a single woman's face in a window. Written faintly on the back, someone had penciled a date and a name. The name looked like the names from my couch. "Keep it," he said. "If it calls, you'll know." I took the photo and felt the same, like someone who had been given a little heavy stone. The next day he asked me to come back. The job continued for a week. Each night we worked in different rooms. We photographed an old piano, a set of boots, a bowl of keys. Each image seemed to hold something. When we looked at the proofs the next morning, small details that we swore were not there before seemed to appear. A hand at the window, a pair of shoes on a stair where there had been none, faces in the grain of wood. After 2 nights of this, Marta asked to see my phone. She had a gentle voice when she spoke, and her hands were always still like hands that had held fragile things before. She asked if I had ever had anyone ask me to list names before. I told her the couch story in small pieces. She listened, slow like someone steeping tea. When I finished, she did not look shocked. She only said, "He likes pictures too." Then she said, quieter, "Keep your eyes on the background. He does not like to be the subject." On the fourth night, Graham told me to take the camera and try a portrait on my own. He wanted to see how I handled the light. Marta sat in a window seat and I raised the lens. I focused on her face, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw a second shape move behind her. The camera captured it as a pale blur near the bookshelf. When I looked at the display, the blur had a form like a small person bent over a book. My stomach went cold and I blinked like someone burning their eyes. Graham patted my shoulder. "You see that?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded small. He told me the stories people bring to a studio in town. Mothers who want a picture of a child lost to an illness. Old men who wanted one more image of their house before they go into a home. He said, "We listen and we photograph, and sometimes we return what is missing." I wanted to ask him how you return something that is missing. I wanted to ask if we should always return it. I stayed quiet because the night felt like a bowl that could be tipped. That evening during a break, Marta pulled me into the small back room where the prints lay. On a corkboard, she had pinned dozens of old photographs. Each had a thin pencil line under the face. Each had a date. Each had a small note. One read, "He remembers the song." Another, "Left his scarf on the step." In the corner, there was a photograph I knew. It was of the couch I had taken from the curb. The image showed a living room with a couch centered in it. In the cushioned seam of the photo, a tiny paper packet poked out. It matched the jar I had found. Marta tapped the photo and said, "People think if they can make an image of a thing, it will stop being hungry." She looked at me like someone speaking a rule. But pictures let him breathe. That night when I went home, I placed the photograph on the mantel. I didn't sleep well. I dreamed of lenses that watched without blinking. On the fifth day, Graham asked me to help with a late job. The call came through the nocturne number I'd seen before, the same number the couch woman had given me. They needed extra hands to photograph an empty room in a house up the river. The pay was better. My rent had that small, hungry voice again. I agreed. When we arrived, the house was colder than the others. The windows were shuttered, and there was a strange smell like old paper and wet wool. Graham unlocked the back door with a key that jingled like a small bell. He led me down a narrow hallway into a room with a large bay window. The floor had circular marks where furniture had sat for a long time. The person who owned the house had left a small note on the piano. "Take pictures of nothing," it said. Graham laughed softly. "Sometimes nothing is the best subject," he said. We set up near the window and waited for light like fishermen waiting for a tide. The hour passed. The camera took one exposure and then another. Marta worked the reflector. The house got thin with light. Then we heard a small sound like paper scraping. I looked toward the shadow at the edge of the room. Something moved. We weren't alone. Graham told me to keep shooting. Marta stood, her face flat and pale. In one of the photographs, a small figure stood by the doorway, just in the corner. The figure seemed to be looking at the window. It wore an old-fashioned coat. The photograph had the kind of clarity that makes your breath stop. When we enlarged the image on the screen, I saw a detail I could not explain. In the figure's hand was a small notebook. On the cover, someone had carved a single word, "List." Graham's hands trembled when he showed me. "We photograph it," he said, "so it is recorded." He sounded like a man reading a line in a book he had read 1,000 times. That night I went home with a photo in my bag. I could not throw it away. I kept it under the lamp and stared until the edges blurred. My phone vibrated with a text. It read, "New list, write it." I did not write a name. I opened a notebook and instead wrote a question. Who leaves these? I went asleep with the question like a stone. In the morning, my neighbor from across the hall, a woman named Rhea who always played records on Sunday morning, knocked on my door with worry on her face. "I saw you at the studio," she said. "Are you okay?" She handed me a small mug of coffee with a lid. "You look tired," she said. She had a way of saying things like a small herb that makes soup better. I told her about the list in the couch and the nocturne number and the camera with the figure and how Graham kept a shelf of envelopes. She listened without surprise. Then she said, "When my grandmother was alive, she used to say that some things keep names because names make them stop being invisible, but some things keep names because they like being counted." She paused. "Not everything that wants to be seen should be." That afternoon, I went back to Arrow and Lens to ask more questions. Martha and Graham were quiet in the studio. They were handling negatives with slow hands. I asked directly who leaves the lists, who keeps them. Graham sighed and said, "People, men and women who needed someone to remember them. We are just witnesses." Marta added, "Sometimes the house asks for a name. Sometimes the thing in the room replies." "Replies how?" I asked. I tried to keep my voice normal, but I felt like a child in an old library. Marta pointed to the corkboard. "Look at that photograph of the piano. Do you see the stillness? Once you start to make the invisible visible, it can answer back. The answer comes in small things, a name, a missing glove, a child's sticker. You will learn to read the clues." That night when I went home, I opened the jar from the couch and found a new slip inside. The handwriting was small and a little shaky. It read, "Photograph HIM. Name HIM when you take his picture." There was a date under it and a scribbled line like a signature. My hands were too small to hold all the weight of it. I felt like I had agreed to keep a secret for a long time. On the last night of my work with Graham, we photographed a small attic room with a single bed and a suitcase opened and empty. The owner of the house, an old man who used to be a watchmaker, came by and watched quietly. He said, "When my wife left, I took a picture of the room and I sent it to her. She never came back." He touched his hands together like someone praying. I wanted her to see it was still kept well. We photographed the suitcase. The camera caught a faint imprint in the lining like a palm print. On the last slide, the lens caught a face at the foot of the bed. It was a small boy's face smiling like a photograph smiles. When we developed it, the face seemed to move slightly like a person blinking underwater. Graham said softly, "He remembers the way someone laughed in this room." The old man began to cry quietly. He said, "Take it, keep it, don't let it go empty." When I left that night, Graham gave me a small cardboard box. Inside were prints from the week. He said, "Keep looking, but be careful." He told me the studio had always been a place where things came to be seen and sometimes to disappear. He said, "We are not the only ones who keep lists." His words were both a warning and a confession. I took the bus home through the city that night and watched faces in the window. People looked like photographs when they sleep. When I pulled a print from the box, I found one that made me stop on the bus. It showed a woman standing at the river with her head down. In the back of the photo, behind the woman, a shadow leaned from the water and reached like a slow hand. The bottom of the print had writing. "He sits by the river and writes NAMES." I fell asleep on the bus and dreamed of a man who sat with a ledger and a camera. I dreamed of small jars under couch cushions and envelopes in pockets and lists folded in the seams of furniture. I woke with the print on my lap and the city moving like someone turning pages. When I went back to work on Monday, the studio was quiet. Graham sat at the table with all the envelopes spread like small leaves. He looked older. He told me, "We have one more job." He said it like a man telling a child to come home. We drove to a house on the edge of town where the river curved like a question. The house was empty now and had a "FOR sale" sign out front. The ad on Craigslist had read, "Old photos for sale, free if you take them." People leave things in houses like someone leaving memories behind. It took a strange kind of courage to walk in and take them. We set up and began to photograph the room. On the mantel there was a row of small framed photos. Each frame had a glass that stretched like an eye. We photographed each one and then the camera found the last photograph. It was a portrait of a man, hands folded, eyes steady. I felt the print watch me. Under it someone had written in careful ink, "Don't forget his name." Graham looked at me and then at the shelf of envelopes. "This is why we are here," he said. "People come to us to keep things. We keep them a little until they learn to say the names aloud. We are the pause between remembering and letting the thing go." I held the photograph and read the face like a page in a book. My throat closed. For the first time, I understood that some jobs are less about making money than about making rules for the thing that wants attention. I thought about the couch and the list and the jar. I thought about the man by the river with the ledger. I understood why the woman had said, "Make sure it's not lonely." When I walked home that night, I felt like a man who had agreed to be the keeper of small, dangerous things. The city lights blurred. The couch sagged in my living room like a small island. I placed the photograph on the mantel beside the couch's print. I turned out the lights and listened to the sound of the building breathing. A text came across my phone at 2:13 a.m. It read, "Photograph HIM. Say his name after the flash." The message had no sender. The command felt like a bell rope you could not ignore. I sat there with the camera Graham had lent me. It was heavy and honest. I thought about what it meant to name someone aloud. Naming is a way to make a thing stop floating. Naming is a way to hold a memory and say, "This was here." I thought of how the photographer's job is to look and then to keep looking until the subject says enough. In the end, I put the camera on the table and wrote a name in my notebook. It was the name from one of the envelopes. I said it out loud in the dark of my living room. My voice sounded small. The room did not answer. The city outside hummed like a refrigerator. The couch seemed to settle like a person who had been waiting. I don't know if saying the name will ever be enough. I don't know if photographing something is a kindness or a way to feed it. I only know that pictures change what is remembered. They can make missing people look like someone standing beside you at a window. They can make a dock look empty and then full. If you ever answer a job ad that asks you to photograph a room, remember this: take pictures carefully. Look for what is not obvious. Keep your hands steady. And if in the background of a photograph there is a small face you do not recognize, and if there is a name tucked into the margin of a print, say it out loud. Find someone you trust and say the name with them. That small act might be the difference between a ghost and a memory. Good night. Hey friends, welcome back to Horror Stories Bedtime. Before we start, take a slow breath. Imagine moving to a new city, scrolling through listings, looking for a clean, quiet room where you can start over. You find one that seems perfect. The photos look warm, the rent is cheap, and the landlord seems kind. Sometimes the right place finds you. Sometimes it finds you too easily. I moved to Cedar Falls, Oregon, after my divorce. The kind of small American town where everyone waves when you drive by, and the grocery store still uses paper bags. I didn't have family there, but I liked how it looked in photos: green hills, clean air, quiet. I wanted a fresh start. Finding a place to live was harder than I expected. Everything was expensive, or too far from the bus line, or wanted long-term tenants only. Then one night, scrolling through Craigslist, I saw it. A post titled "Room for Rent, $400 month, all utilities included." The ad had only one photo: a small, sunlit room with cream-colored walls, a neat bed, and a single lamp by the window. Underneath it said, "For quiet tenant, female preferred. Move in anytime, first month free. Call or text 971 550 508 for 3. It was posted 30 minutes ago. I texted right away. A few minutes later, a reply came back. "Hi, this is Mrs. Harper. You can come by tonight if you'd like to see it." She sent an address on Ashgrove Lane, near the edge of town. The message ended with a smiley face, slightly smiling face, the kind older people use when they've just learned emojis. It was already getting dark, but something about the message felt warm, polite, safe. I grabbed my jacket and drove. Ashgrove Lane looked like a postcard, maple trees arching over quiet sidewalks, porches with flower pots, wind chimes singing softly. The house was a white two-story with dark green shutters and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. A porch light glowed steady, not bright, just enough to see. I parked and texted, "I'm here." The front door opened almost immediately. An older woman stood there, gray hair in a loose bun, wearing a cardigan and house slippers. She smiled in that gentle, motherly way that makes you feel like you've met before. "You must be Sarah," she said. Her voice was soft. "Come in, dear, you're right on time." The house smelled like cinnamon and fresh laundry. A radio played quietly from another room, some old jazz tune. Mrs. Harper led me through the hallway, her slippers whispering against the floor. She showed me the kitchen, spotless, everything labeled, and the small dining area with lace curtains and a vase of fake flowers. Then she took me upstairs. The hallway carpet was pale blue, worn in the middle from years of steps. 3 doors, bathroom, her room, and the one at the end of the hall. She stopped at the last door and smiled. "This one's available," she said. "Hasn't been used in a while, but it's kept clean." She opened the door. It was exactly like the photo. Small, neat, quiet. Cream-colored walls, lace curtains, a small lamp by the window. Even the bedspread matched. I walked in and felt something that's hard to explain, not fear, not warmth, just a heaviness. Like walking into a memory that isn't yours. Mrs. Harper stood in the doorway. Her voice softened. "I do have one rule," she said. "Don't lock the door at night. Old houses settle, and I worry about safety if I need to check on you." She smiled again. "Other than that, you'll have all the privacy you want." I nodded. It felt odd, but she looked kind. She said she'd never rented before, just helping make ends meet since my husband passed. I told her I could move in next week. She said, "Why wait? The room's ready." By the next evening, I had my suitcase unpacked and a little candle burning on the windowsill. Mrs. Harper made vegetable soup and brought me a bowl. We talked about small things, the weather, her garden, how quiet the town was. She told me her husband, Frank, used to be a carpenter and had built most of the furniture in the house by hand. She said she still felt him sometimes, in the walls, you know. I smiled politely. She meant it as comfort. That first night I slept fine. Mostly. Except once. At around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, even steps, heel, toe, like someone packing. They stopped outside my door. Then something soft brushed the doorknob, like fingertips testing it. The knob turned slightly, then stopped. I held my breath. A long minute passed. Then the footsteps moved away. In the morning, Mrs. Harper hummed while making breakfast. When I asked if she'd been up late, she said, "Oh no, dear, I sleep like a stone." Then she smiled and added, "You must be hearing the house settling." On my 3rd night there, I woke again. Same time, around 3 a.m. This time, no footsteps. Just a faint sound of humming. It came from the end of the hallway. A soft, steady tune. I listened, heart pounding. The melody was low and slow, like a lullaby half remembered. When I got up and opened my door, the hallway was empty. But the humming stopped the moment my feet touched the floor. I went back to bed, told myself it was nothing. But in the morning, I found something strange. On my dresser was a folded piece of paper. Not mine. It was yellow, like old stationery. On it in shaky handwriting was written, "Please stop singing." My hands trembled. I brought it to Mrs. Harper at breakfast. She looked at it and frowned gently. "Oh," she said, "you must have found one of Frank's old notes. He used to leave reminders for himself. Don't worry, dear." She crumpled the paper and tossed it in the trash. By the end of the week, I started noticing little things. The lamp by the window sometimes turned itself off at night. The curtains swayed when there was no wind. And every night at 3 a.m., I woke without knowing why, heart racing, ears straining. Nothing happened, but something waited too. One night, while unpacking more boxes, I found a small drawer built into the base of the bed frame. It was so well hidden, I wouldn't have noticed if my bracelet hadn't slipped into the crack. Inside the drawer were 3 items. A Polaroid photo of the room, same bed, same window, but with a woman sitting on the edge of the bed, smiling faintly. A faded receipt for a locksmith, dated April 2009. And a folded slip of paper that said, in the same shaky hand, "Don't close the door, she hates that." That night I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I asked Mrs. Harper about the photo. Her face went still. "That must have been the last tenant," she said softly. "A young woman, didn't stay long." I asked why she left. Mrs. Harper looked down at her tea. "Some people aren't meant to live alone," she said. Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Days passed. I worked part-time at the local library and tried not to think about the notes. But the tension in that room thickened, like humidity before a storm. Every sound felt sharper, the creak of the floorboards, the sigh of the pipes. One night I stayed up reading, too wired to sleep. At 2:47 a.m. the lamp flickered. I froze. The bulb dimmed to a soft orange. In its glow, I saw the outline of someone sitting in the chair by the window. A woman, hair hanging loose, wearing a long dress. She looked almost peaceful, except her head was tilted too far to the side. When I blinked, the chair was empty. I wanted to scream, but my voice felt trapped somewhere behind my ribs. The room smelled faintly of lilac. I turned the light back on. There was another note on my dresser. "Please keep the door open." My heart pounded. I went to Mrs. Harper's room. The door was half open. Her bed was empty, but I could still hear humming faint, coming from somewhere below. The basement door was open a crack. A soft light flickered at the bottom of the stairs. I called her name once, no answer. The humming stopped. Then slowly, it started again, louder, closer. I took a step down. And another. At the bottom, I saw her. Mrs. Harper stood facing a wall covered in photographs, dozens of Polaroids pinned in rows. Each one showed the same room upstairs. My room. Each photo had a different person sitting on the bed, all women, all smiling faintly. Each photo had a small note taped under it. Room 3 stayed 12 days. Room 3 stayed 8 days. Room 3 stayed 15 days. And the last one blank except for a date, this week. Mrs. Harper turned slowly. Her face was calm, almost kind. "Oh, Sarah," she said softly, "I told you not to close the door." I stepped back. "What is this?" I whispered. She smiled the way a grandmother might smile before telling a bedtime story. "Frank built this house carefully," she said. "Every room remembers its guests, especially that one." She touched one of the Polaroids gently. They all came looking for a place to stay, and they stayed. My throat went dry. "I'm leaving," I said. Her expression didn't change. "You'll have to tell her that," she said. "She doesn't like people leaving without saying goodbye." She pointed to the stairs. I turned and ran. When I reached my room, the lamp was flickering again. The air felt heavier than before. The window was open, curtains blowing inward like breath. On the bed lay a new Polaroid. Fresh, still developing. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was me sitting on the bed, holding the photo. And behind me, faint but clear in the half-formed image, was another face. A woman with long hair, smiling faintly, head tilted just so. I dropped the picture and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I drove straight through the night, didn't even take the highway, just followed the yellow lines until the sun rose behind me. 2 days later, I tried calling the number from the Craigslist post again. It was disconnected. When I looked up the address, it wasn't listed anymore. No Ashgrove Lane in Cedar Falls. No Harper in the phone directory. But last week, a new post appeared in the Craigslist housing section. Room for rent $400 month. Quiet tenant preferred. Must not close the door. Call or text 971 550 508 for 3. Same photo. Same lamp. Same faint smile in the window reflection. The one that looks like it's watching you. If you ever move somewhere new, and the rent feels too good to be real, and the person renting it looks kind and lonely, ask to see all the rooms. Ask how long the last tenant stayed. And whatever you do, don't close the door at night. Some rooms don't want to be empty. Good night.